Hello everyone. I want to share my incredibly rewarding and very effective experience in finding an effective iGaming project to work with on a revenue share model for driving traffic using the revenue share model. Many people generally approach the selection of this type of opportunities without any objectivity, focusing solely on the revenue share percentage offered by affiliate programs, but paying little attention to the projects themselves and their traffic management policies. Meanwhile, the way this policy is structured will affect the most important key performance indicators for the revenue share in a significant way. These include metrics like the player return rate, measuring how frequently players come back, and the retention rate, showing how long they stay engaged. In general, the accountability for the efficacy of these metrics falls almost entirely on the project itself, as we often do not have interaction points with the traffic brought to the platform. Essentially, in fact, this is primarily due to the nature of the project. Yes, in some cases, we can definitely subscribe the traffic to the same push notifications, or if the traffic was brought in through email campaigns, we also have access to the database, the email database. And we can send out mailings that motivate a return to the project through these databases. But these sources of user interactions are, in fact, not consistent and, for the most part, actually cover only a limited segment of the web traffic generated, which substantially diminishes the efficacy of this source of interaction. I would also like to clarify why they are inconsistent, because players can easily and quickly unsubscribe from various different types of push notifications and email marketing campaigns and promotional messages, and in fact, we will have absolutely no effective ways to try and motivate the player or user to return to the project or platform. Here, I would really like to emphasize, I want to reiterate that one of the main factors is the retention rate, and the higher this metric, the more frequently the traffic we attract returns to the game, thereby generating more profit. Indeed, the retention rate is a very key indicator of success. In general, when choosing such projects and offers for traffic redirection, I usually look at 4 important and critical considerations that are absolutely essential and important for me to check. These important considerations include the slot payout, which is also known as RTP, and the bonus program policy, withdrawal limits and speed, and lastly, the overall reputation and reliability of the project itself, such as the project itself. Before talking about RTP, I would first and foremost like to focus a bit on the important aspect of the psychology of the player. Gaming traffic is united by one important psychological aspect. Players return to platforms where they win more frequently and in larger amounts. The frequency and size of these wins depend on the RTP. Here, I would like to, in a brief manner, in just a few words, talk about how platforms, specifically online casinos, are structured and details. Simply put, online casinos are just intermediaries between the providers, who are the creators of gaming software, and the traffic. And the providers, these organizers develop slots and undergo checks by competent authorities and obtain licenses. And the entire game actually takes place on the side and on the servers of the providers. And the RTP percentage is controlled and set by the providers, not the online casinos. In other words, the online casinos, as complex and multifaceted projects, can hardly influence the return to player, RTP, percentage in any significant or meaningful way. In general, when it comes to RTP, it is usually static in most cases. There are certain providers whose RTP is almost static across all their software. For example, Pragmatic, if memory serves, has a standard RTP of around 95%. Additionally, some providers, besides having a static RTP, have a specific allocated RTP for certain slots. If the RTP is 95 overall, it can be 96 to 97 on certain slots. However, there is one point. Some providers have what is called dynamic RTP. What does this mean? The provider allows even the online casino to choose the return to player, RTP, either at the minimum values or the maximum values, such as for their games. Providers like Pragmatic and PlayGo fall into this category. Checking the RTP set by these providers is generally quite straightforward, such as. Now I would like to show you 2 screenshots. This is the provider Pragmatic, the same slot, and we can see that you can very easily check the RTP through the information section in the slot itself. By clicking on the information section and scrolling a bit, you can verify the RTP of the slots. And here in Pragmatic, the same slot can have an RTP of 96.5% in one case and 94.2% in another case. These are two completely different projects, but the same provider. Many might think that these 2% are absolutely insignificant. But it is important to understand that the mathematics of RTP generally works over tens of thousands, if not millions of spins. So, over such a distance, these 2% will already be a significant amount. In other words, if a slot has an RTP of 94% instead of 96%, the traffic will win less in that slot, and consequently, the frequency and volume of winnings will be lower compared to a provider with an RTP of 96%. This is a vivid example of a project where the stated return is 94%, but in reality, the RTP is being understated, providing further insights and context to better understand the situation. And the second point, which I would like to clarify further, now I will show you some screenshots, is the provider Plain Go. The same slot, Tom of Madness, and in Plain Go, unlike Pragmatic, you can't view the RTP in any other way. That is, you can't see the RTP through the slot information it provides, but there's a certain mechanic, a way to view it through the page code, that is, through requests. This mechanic involves inspecting the network requests made by the slot game to the server, which can reveal the RTP information embedded within the data packets. Here are two screenshots of the same slot. In one case, we see that the RTP is set at 91%, and in the other case, it is set at 96%. There's a difference of 5%. There's a difference of 5%. Here the difference is actually 5%. Here the difference is actually 5%. This again indicates that if this project has an RTP of 91%, the traffic will hardly win in the slot. Not that it won't win at all, but it will win significantly less than that of the provider, which is generally considered to be approximately 96% RTP. Actually, I won't go into great detail here on how to view this through the page code. I have a very thorough manual in my Telegram channel, and anyone interested can check it out. Everything is explained step by step and clearly there. It might seem that for us as webmasters who bring traffic to a project on a revenue share model, it would be beneficial for the project to have a lower RTP, because under such conditions, the traffic wins significantly less, consequently loses more, and we receive a higher payout volume from our partnership. However, the problem is that with a lowered RTP, we only win in the short term. Initially, the traffic will play and lose more, but eventually, not seeing any reasonable, let's say, wins or returns from the casino, the traffic will sooner or later start looking for other projects in the long run. In other words, they will go elsewhere to find other places to play, and consequently, we will lose the traffic we brought to the project. This is why it is crucial to maintain a balanced RTP to ensure long-term success and sustainability for both the project and our partnership. I will repeat once again that in the initial stages this will not be noticeable at all, but over the long term, this drop will be very evident. Therefore, when analyzing projects, it is crucial to meticulously consider and thoroughly understand the policies these projects establish regarding the set RTP in detail. Why did I give you the example of these two providers, Pragmatic and Plain Go? Because from experience, I can say that it's enough to check just these two providers, and based on the results of this thorough check, you can already, in my opinion, draw conclusions about the RTP policy of this casino, this project. I will repeat once again that in the long run, since working on a revenue share model implies long-term work and the payback period for such traffic is significantly longer, it is definitely more beneficial for us to have a higher RTP. This is because a higher RTP will result in a higher player return rate and retention rate. The second metric is indeed the bonus program, which I consider one of the oldest and most effective ways to very effectively retain players. There are different scenarios here in various ways. A player can be given a bonus either as a deposit bonus or even free spins in the form of bonuses. All these bonuses are tied together by the so-called wager. A wager is a multiplier applied to the bonus x40, x50, etc. This coefficient determines the absolutely essential required amount of bets necessary for users in order to withdraw money. The most common bonus program that is most commonly seen right now is when traffic is given a bonus in the form of thousands of rubles. This bonus often typically comes with a wager of around 40, but to receive it, a deposit also typically equal to the bonus amount must generally be made. The traffic makes a deposit of approximately around roughly 1,000 rubles and receives a bonus of another 1,000 rubles with a wagering requirement of x40. This is indeed the most common program, but there's a very extremely significant portion of projects that often use the so-called combined wager. What is meant by a combined wager? If we go back to our example of 1,000 rubles, let's say the traffic is given a bonus of 1,000 rubles with a wager of x40. But again, to receive this bonus, you need to make a deposit of 1,000 rubles. And the wager applies not only to the bonus amount, but to the bonus and deposit amount. What does this lead to? It leads to the fact that traffic can almost never actually play through such bonuses. Since in reality, the wagering requirement for the bonus amount is not x40, but x80, because the wagering requirements also apply to the deposit amounts. Again, such a bonus program, if the projects have a bonus program based on a combined wager, indeed, actually, it performs well in the short term. It performs exceptionally well. Initially, when the traffic receives an email from the project about a bonus, it returns promptly, and the retention rate seems to work perfectly fine. However, the problem is that this kind of bonus is almost impossible to play through successfully. And this leads to the traffic coming to the conclusion that these bonuses are no longer important. In other words, they are simply not worthwhile to him. This significantly reduces the player return rate to this project. Since the combined bonus policy, let's call it that, it starts to simply not play the role it is essentially intended for, to some extent, basically. Therefore, this is something that should really be paid attention to. Here are the very important limits and withdrawal speed. If we look at the market right now, most initiatives and projects are currently generally overall doing fine in this regard. Both the cash withdrawals and limitations are reasonable for everyone. However, there are some projects that, firstly, set daily limitations. From what I found, these limitations are around 50,000 rubles per day, which is extremely low at the moment. What could be the consequences of such low payout limitations in general? First and foremost, you can bring in a so-called whale through the revenue share model, which is quite effective. This is a player who will regularly deposit quite large amounts, meaning they will play quite well. And if this player ends up on a project where the withdrawal limits are 50,000 rubles per day, then yes, he will indeed win something. But while he is withdrawing it all, Moreover, if this situation continues, he will be so dissatisfied with all these metrics that he will go back to searching for another project. Therefore, it is extremely essential to pay attention to withdrawal limits and speed. There is actually one particular project, I won't actually name the specific brand to avoid discrediting it, which has a very interesting and specific withdrawal condition. They do not process withdrawals earlier than 3 days after the deposit. There are even such cases. So, this will affect the retention rate. That is, if players encounter such issues even once, they will never return to this project. Accordingly, we will lose the traffic we brought in, and it will no longer provide a certain level of effectiveness. And lastly, what I specifically want to mention is the overall reputation of these very important projects. Throughout the history of the CS and iGaming, there have been several episodes that were, let's say, quite unpleasant. What is working on a revenue share model? In essence, it's work that relies purely on trust. We simply trust our partner by default, believing that we will invest our money, knowledge, skills, and time into developing the partnership, and you will definitely pay us. So, in reality, if we look at it globally, we have no guarantees except, let's say, the reputation and word of our partner. History has shown that, over the span of approximately 5 to 6 years, there have been numerous significant and high-profile cases such as these. One of the cases involves a fairly large affiliate program, which is also being introduced now, and projects itself both on itself and on the market, simply took and reduced the revenue share payout percentage. If it gave everyone a start at around 50%, which is standard, around 40 to 50%, then they unilaterally reduced this percentage to 35%, and in some cases even to 15%, which actually made it economically unfeasible to work with such partners. Secondly, them have I know webmasters who worked with those guys. They didn't even manage to recoup their investments, and they ended up severing the relationship. Well, if we talk about notable moments concerning reputation, there was a very well-known affiliate program. That is, I think anyone working in the iGaming industry knows it, called Play Attack. This affiliate program had a network of online casinos, if I remember correctly, around 4 to 6 projects. She actively attracted webmasters to work with them, and indeed, everything seemed to be fine. But at some definite point in time, it all started when they began commencing their process of starting off gradually delaying their payments, processes, and actions. About the traffic, these were the first warning signs, and then they shut down within 2 days. They shut down and so didn't pay anyone anything. You could say they scammed people. So, the point of these two small, yet very instructive stories is that when choosing an iGaming offer for a revenue share, you must also take into consideration the important reputation of the reputable brand you are working with. This is to avoid, or rather to minimize the risks of ending up in such unfortunate situations. Well, here, you should definitely pay attention to the projects themselves, analyze them thoroughly, in detail, and comprehensively, because the effectiveness of your partnership will directly depend on the policies of these projects. Because if the characteristics we discussed today show a more positive trend over time in different metrics, for instance, in terms of retention rate and revenue, which we have reviewed, it is better than if the project lacks such characteristics. In general, I can say that I specifically and thoroughly checked around 12 different online casinos for this particular conference, and only in one single case did a project 100% meet all the ideal and necessary requirements. There were casinos that had everything, some good here, bad there, but only one project was 100% perfect. So that's all I wanted to say.